All right, so we'll give everybody about 2 minutes. But for those of you that are already here, I do see some familiar names. If you want to use the chat and tell everybody where you're from, I know that that's always a way that kind of brings people together. So I guess for those of you listening, I'm tuning in from New Jersey. And Catherine, where are you at?
I'm in San Antonio, Texas.
Nice. And we have the CFMA chair, Jen Murphy, joining us from Michigan. I was gonna just complain about the weather here, but knowing that she's on, I was like, I can't say anything because it's probably much colder in Michigan. Another couple of seconds and we will go ahead and get this kicked off right at 2 o'clock. All right, so for those of you that have joined us, thank you so much. This webinar topic came out of the travel that I did this fall. I spent a lot of time traveling to industry conferences, and one thing that became abundantly clear was in construction, the construction industry is in search of what I would say is like this mythical perfect ERP. They're looking for an end-to-end solution that does it all because they are frustrated not only with their growing tech stacks, but also with the price tag that comes along with it. And while it would be great if there were a perfect solution out there that did it all, the reality is that is never going to happen. Why? Because ERPs were not designed to do everything from accounting to HR. They weren't created to manage projects, and they are not going to be your all-in-one solution. So today I'm joined by Kathryn Hall, controller with Bandy Constructors, and we're going to talk about why that belief exists and how contractors are solving the problem without having to find a new ERP. So Kathryn, thank you so much for joining me. And would you like to take a couple of seconds and tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Um, my name's Kathryn Hall, controller Bandy Constructors. I've been here since 2016, so about 10 years now. Um, kind of moved my way up all the way to controller. But we are a mid-sized commercial GC here in San Antonio, Texas. Um, just since we're talking about ERPs, we're currently on Sage 300. We also use HH2, Antera, and Autodesk on top of it. But yeah, I'm excited.
Well, and I love that you gave everybody the background with your tech stack too. So throughout this presentation, if you have any questions about how Kathryn and Bandy was able to build their tech stack the way they have, please feel free to use that chat functionality or the Q&A and ask away. So before we get into talking about solutions, Kathryn, in your experience, when you hear other construction financial professionals talk about their ERP, what frustrations do you often hear them talking about?
You know, too much data, not enough insight, cash flow blind spots, slow month end close, ERP vendor over promises. They always tell you it's going to do it all, and then guess what? It doesn't. Um,
Yes. And so then when you have like had these conversations with your peers, because I know in our conversations prepping for this webinar, you yourself had considered, do we need to like look for a new ERP? So which one of these seems to come up most often, of all the ones that you listed that really is that kind of spark where people say, I've had enough. It's got to be the ERP. It can't be anything else but the ERP.
yeah. So sorry. Yeah, definitely just not being able to get the information that you need out of your ERP to like make those like decisions about cash flow, about project forecasts, about stuff like that. The reports just aren't tailored to like making those executive decisions. You kind of have to export them and work with the numbers in Excel or somewhere else to kind of figure out how you're gonna what the data is telling you.
And let's talk about why that is. So if we really think about what an ERP was built to do and what they weren't built to do, ERPs were designed to be a system of record. They're there to protect the financial integrity, to ensure that you are in compliance and you have, a track record that can be audited. But they weren't designed for flexible reporting. And as a company that specializes in analytics and reporting, I will tell you that even, solutions like ProNovos and Terra, the others out in the industry, we find that construction companies, it seems like about 80% of the reports you all need from an operational perspective are the same, but that 20% variance, there's a lot that goes into pulling the data from different locations. You talked about your tech stack. So, we have clients saying, hey, we have this in HH2, but we'd love to be able to look at this data in comparison with our project data, in comparison with this ERP data. Can you make that report for us? And of course, the company that specializes in that, we can do it, but it takes a lot of work. And so the expectation that that the industry has with ERPs having that type of flexibility, when you think about the original purpose and the way in which they were built, sometimes it feels a little bit unrealistic. And one of the analogies I use, and Kathryn, I'll use it on you, is do you drive a car?
I do.
Yes. Does your car also work on a lake?
Does not. No.
So your car is not a boat, and I'm assuming then with that logic, your car is also not a plane, right?
Correct.
So think about your ERP. It was built for a very specific purpose. And yes, technology is evolving and our expectations with technology is evolving, but ERPs are not at that place. And so when I've seen people who in the last 10 years have went through two or three different ERPs in search for this like mythical solution, it's like, all right, pause what you're doing and think about what the core of an ERP needs to do, and then start looking for other technologies that plug and play nicely with that ERP to get the results that you need for your company. So, I guess from your perspective as a controller, what do you see when it comes to the trust in what the ERP does well?
Yeah, so the ERP, it's a system of record, so it keeps the GL balances, the subledgers, all the core modules, AP, AR, payroll. It keeps all of the transactions, in line. It does a great job at all of that, which is what you would expect from an ERP. I think anyone that you buy will do a good job at all of those things.
So, where do you start to feel like, as a company, when you all were evaluating your ERP, where did you start feeling like maybe you were asking for it to do more than it was designed to do?
Yeah, so once we got into Sage 300, we needed to get those higher level reports, and like you can make them, but it's very expensive and very time consuming. So we ended up still using Excel to do the WIP reports, like reconcile to the GL, get like real time job health reports, labor reports mid-month. We just, they weren't out of the box, so we had to figure out a way to get those reports out and then figure out how to get them to our project manager so they can make decisions off of them. The problem was a lot of the time they're historical, like at the end of the month or the middle of the next month, that's when we were finding out about, labor overages, subcontract stuff. Um, and at that point, it's kind of too late to fix things.
And what about from your leadership team and the executives? Were they happy with the reporting they were getting, or what were you having to provide to them?
Yeah, so for my executive level meetings, I was having to export everything with inquiries and then reconfigure all of the data into Excel and then make my own dashboards. And it takes a very long time to do all of that. But I mean, they all know how to read the financials and those are fine. But to get like the cash flow and stuff like that, that it was all manual process in Excel.
You have mentioned your PMs. And so thinking about the needs of your PMs, what type of requests would you get from them that were really hard for you to just export from your ERP to provide to them?
Um, you know, I always get, I got questions all the time about oh, what's in this cost code? What's in this cost code? They had no idea what numbers were actually in the reports. So I was constantly like running extra reports for them. Um, and then, when I was asking for projected costs, stuff like that, it was really hard for them to do those projections because they had no idea what was already in there. They just had no visibility into the ERP.
I'm going to ask a question that I know the answer to, but why not just give them access to the ERP?
Yeah. I don't trust them. I could give them some access, but that would require, all of the PMs having remote desktop access and then Sage access and then more licenses. And it was just easier to, keep them out of it and send them the reports that they needed.
Okay. So you've given us quite a few examples of, some of the limitations. And so now I'm curious from the audience, we're launching a poll right now. We are wondering, from your perspective, where does your ERP fall short today? Is it the WIP reporting and updates? Is it your forecasting job performance? Is it PM visibility without ERP access? Is it relying heavily on Excel? Or is it all of the above? And so as we're seeing some of these initial responses come in, it's looking like the majority of people are saying it's all of the above. So Kathryn, for you, as you're seeing this come in, it looks like second is forecasting job performance. And then we got a three-way tie for the other ones. Does this surprise you at all, or what are some of your initial takes on seeing where your peers are struggling with their ERPs?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, all of these come from the same family of issues. They, you know, they all come from mostly the visibility that the PMs have. And then just, like we said, the things that the ERP can't provide, like the forecasting and all of that stuff, is just ERPs aren't built to do stuff like that. So, no, that's all of the above was what I thought would be the biggest answer.
So, when looking at some of these options from your perspective, which one of those frustrations within ERP created the most friction between the financial management team and the field team?
Um, Probably forecasting job performance and then just the PM visibility. Just because, forecasting is like forward looking and they just didn't have the right tools to be able to help me do that. And it just, yeah, it wasn't. The field expected the reports to be updated in real time, but there was always a delay between, when the field work was done and when it was like reflected in accounting because it has to go through approvals and it just you know, it takes time. So they didn't have any um real time access.
So let's think of, so we know that the field needs real-time access to their numbers. The way in which the accounting team works, it's not necessarily in real time. That's because of the limitations of your ERP. So now we have two different departments who have very specific things they require, but the technology is not allowing them to meet each other's needs. So when that happens, you said something interesting that I'm kind of going to prime you to share with the audience, but you had done something too where you felt it was really important for you to understand how the PMs worked. Could you share with the viewers today about how you went out to the field to really get an understanding before making any changes to the technology when it came to like your PMs?
Yeah, so I realized pretty early on that the PMs and accounting did not speak the same language. So I went out to the job site, which it probably was 5 years before I went to a job site. But I finally went out and like tried to understand their job and how like speak their language because I was asking them for things that they didn't understand. Once we aligned on once I said it differently in their language where how they could understand, um, they we were both happy. It was easy for them to provide what I needed. it was easy for me to use those numbers and what I needed to do. So yeah, it was just really important to kind of really understand what the PM's job was, what they were dealing with out in the field, and why they needed the numbers that they needed, and then equally to help them understand why I needed the numbers that I needed. Um, so yeah, that was a key thing.
Excellent. So when we're thinking about the ERP and we go back, and I know oftentimes the ERP, we think about this as like the backbone of accounting. And it to your point with the PMs and their needs, it was never meant to provide day-to-day visibility. It has since evolved, and we are seeing a lot of the ERP um, providers, if you will, they're starting to scale up. They're starting to create some new technology, and they're starting to meet the needs of today's consumers, but we're still not there. I know you're on Sage 300, and I've spoke to, a lot of individuals who are also on 300, and, there's this pressure to go to Intact. But with Intact, there is this, it's a great system, but it wasn't built for construction. And so we're still seeing a lot of individuals in the industry saying like, Intact looks great. It's really nice, but it wasn't built for the industry that we work in. And so even if I go to Intact, I'm still not getting my end-to-end solution. And so I know that you all chose to kind of stay on 300 for a bit longer. And instead of moving to Intact, you are layering on top to get the financial intelligence that you need. Why do you think so many people are resistant to the idea of looking for a solution, an ERP solution that is the backbone for your accounting, but then it has open APIs where you can plug in and build a module that works best for your organization? What do you think the resistance is to that?
I think a lot of it's just that they don't know that that's an option. I didn't know for a while that like there was these things that could sit on top of Sage to like get the data out seamlessly, like in real time for me, in real time for the PMs. Once I learned about that, it was really a no-brainer. Like we had to have that. It saved me so much time, not running reports all the time. They could finally have all the information they needed. Um, so I don't know. I don't know why people would be resistant other than the fact that they don't know about it.
And would you say so here, we talk about, with the PMs in your situation, how you ended up being buried in spreadsheets. I know that there's a lot of companies that we work with where the way in which their WIP report gets created is they have to export the data from their ERP into an Excel sheet. Then they have a separate workbook that they will send to their PMs to get all of their, percentage complete job cost numbers. Then they get that workbook back, and then they have to marry up the two. And now they finally have their WIP report. And you had talked about, why that becomes historical data, because by the time it's done, if you're lucky, you're only looking at 45 days in the past. If you're not so lucky, it might be 60 to 90 days, depending on how frequently you're creating your WIP reports. So why do you think it's just become the norm in construction to rely so heavily on Excel, even though it's time consuming and outdated, versus looking for more modern solutions?
We've used it for so long. Some people are scared to get out of Excel because it's what they know, it's what they like using. Um, but you don't have to get rid of it to be able to use it in a more effective way. Even with these so this with Intera and the solutions that I have, like I export to Excel all the time and still transform my data into what specific needs that I want. But it's always the same. The data is always coming out the same, so it's just a lot easier. And then I don't have to worry about, oh, did the PMs mess up my formulas? Did they, you know, what spreadsheet am I going to get back from them when they send it back to me? Um, so yeah.
So with your PMs, what did that month end look like when you and your counterparts in the field weren't looking at the same version of truth? Meaning, you have one set of data you're looking at, they have the data that they had submitted, they're waiting for you to marry it all up. So what ended up happening from a cultural perspective when you guys weren't on the same page?
Yeah, so it just made a culture of like the PMs were reacting. They weren't reviewing their jobs like as thoroughly as they could, although they couldn't because they didn't have the data. But they never knew where their job was until after the end of the month. When I finished all the numbers, they got all their pay apps in, all the cost was in. Then you can finally see like where the cash flow is and all of that. Um, they they just weren't giving me forecasts. They would try, but it would, you know. So that's sort of a fairly new thing that we're training them on with these new tools that we have, is getting more accurate forecasts from them.
Did you feel like you spent more time, or you or them spent more time defending the numbers than actually discussing them?
Oh, absolutely. I was always telling them what was in a number, did they miscode it? It was never their fault, but um, so yeah, it's just defending the system consumes energy. Um, when all of my energy went into proving the numbers, there was no time left to like use the numbers to really like see where the jobs were getting off track and all of that. So
Yeah. So we've spent the first half of this kind of talking about the problems, and hopefully those of you listening can relate to some of these, and these are some of the pain points that you're struggling with. So we've talked about, ProNovos is what we do. Antera is another industry provider who focuses specifically on Sage 300. But I want to show you all conceptually what this would look like. So when we're talking about these different tools that layer over your ERP, this is what we're discussing. So both solutions, both Antera and ProNovos, will hook up directly to your ERP, and then it's going to pull in those financials. So one difference though with ProNovos is we connect with about 8 different ERPs, as opposed to just Sage 300. But let's talk about the whip. This is, I know, a big headache for a lot of people. And so the difference between what we would do and what you would see in your ERP is we're taking all of that data and we're looking at the interconnectivity of the data. So that way everything kind of rolls up into one view as opposed to you having several worksheets in Excel that then you have to kind of make this work. We have seen some client Excel workbooks that could do exactly this, but the amount of time that it has taken them to build that, the amount of stress, they don't let anybody else touch it. So could you theoretically do this with pivot tables and with your Excel formulas? Absolutely, but it wouldn't be a stable technology. It would be something that could very easily be disrupted. So for instance, when you look at this, one thing that you're going to get if you start layering technologies over your ERP is you're going to get better data visualization. The brain processes images significantly faster than it does words and numbers. And most brains were not built to look at rows and columns of numbers quickly. So that's why the data visualizations, especially for your PMs who maybe don't have a high financial acumen, this is really going to help those individuals in your organization. So let's just go ahead and take a look. Let's pretend that this is a project that we have. When we talk about the interconnectivity and bridging the gap between the field and the office, this is one of the things that we have built into to Pronovos. So your PM could come in here, and as the accounting team, you're already going to be well aware of these numbers, but you're going to want your PMs to be able to like tell you, what is your projected final cost. So now we're giving people an easy way to go into their cost forecast. They can see exactly where things are at, where the project margins are. Are we trending in the right direction, or something eating into the profitability? And then they can go through here and they can start manually making edits to the final cost. So, they can come in here and they can change this. And let's say it's going to come in cheaper than what we had anticipated. They can go ahead and update that number. But what's really nice with this is they have to give us a root cause of why that's happening, because this is going to help the feedback loop once this job is done to see what went well, what didn't go well, and then you can provide this information to your estimators as well, so that way they can learn from it going forward. So let's just say that this one was an internal budget adjustment. So I can leave notes here. Um, so anything I need to share, and now all of this gets stored into that project. So now you have a one-stop shop for this project, and you can go through and you can see what the cost forecast is. And then what we're going to do is this currently says it doesn't match the WIP. So then we can then push this change to the WIP. And now all of this information is going to roll back to that location. A few other things for PMs, Kathryn, in our conversations that we had discussed was them asking you a lot about billings. And so now in a given project, your PMs can come in and they can see exactly where everything stands with billings, what's been paid, what hasn't been paid. If there is an outstanding pay app that hasn't been paid, the PM can go in here, they can reach out to their contact, and then they can go ahead and they can update when the expected payment date's going to be. They can also start seeing from a project perspective what is the average days to pay. And then when they see invoices that are exceeding that, that then can become a red flag for them where they can say, all right, this is outside of the norm of what we can expect with this client. What's going on here? So we are putting a lot of financial data into the hands of PMs, but in a way that makes it easy for them to understand. And not so cumbersome, just giving them spreadsheets. So it makes it interactive for them to be able to go through here and have the autonomy to make decisions and know where things are standing. And then for you all, then it pushes it all back to the whip. And I see we have a few. Okay, so you're taking care of all of the all of the questions here, but the answer, Michael, is yes, we do connect to Foundation. Um, so yes,
We
we'll
have a question from Jennifer. When the forecast is pushed back to the WIP, does it push that to Sage or just to the ProNovos WIP?
So just to the ProNovos whip. So we are currently working on writebacks. Our writeback, we have done it with Foundation. We have not. This year's the year where we're working on all of the writebacks for the ERP. So um, coming soon.
Yeah, and
All
Terra
right.
also doesn't push back to Sage, if you're wondering.
That is good to know. And I will show everybody one more thing, just because PMs are the one area that I hear most when we're talking to clients and prospects, about just kind of making it easier for them to know where things stand with their project. Um, you had an interesting insight in regards to like, the job reviews and the forecast. Are you okay with sharing the lack of forecasting that was happening with your PMs prior to all of this and kind of what you're doing now to bridge that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have mostly CSP jobs and competitive sale proposals. So we have it's a lump sum contract. We just like weren't forecasting. Like we were sort of moving money around in the budget. They were forecasting that way, but we weren't like, I mean, we hadn't had any issues of like, going over budget, thankfully, but we knew we needed to get better at forecasting going forward. So now that we have the tools to do so, we're really focusing on getting our PMs to, start actually doing like real forecasts and seeing where the overages are, where those, estimating busts or where they, something happened in the field. We just to have all the answers so we can get better in the future.
And so one of the other things that is with our tool, I don't know if Antera has anything like this, but we knew that PMs are really busy. They don't like paperwork. So we were trying to think about how can we make it as easy as possible for them to see all of their numbers, knowing they won't have access to the ERP and knowing they don't necessarily want to spend hours looking at an Excel workbook. So how can we make it quick and easy for them? And so one thing we did was we broke down the main categories that a PM would need to look at before they sit down with the leadership team for their project review or job review. And so this right here, it goes through step by step of those categories, starting with the financials, high level snapshots. If everything looks good for them, they can go ahead and click I reviewed. If there's any notes, they leave those notes and then it prompts them to the next section. Next section is their project forecast. They go through here, they can look at the summary of their job cost and they can see if things are looking right. And if there's any issues, they can then go back to that job cost page that we were just previously on and make their adjustments. If there's any notes, they can leave them here. And what's nice about this is when you have everything in one location, you create these digital breadcrumbs for your project. So instead of it being tied up in email or tied up in written communication or tied up in Excel sheet, you now have a snapshot of everything that happened in this job here. So if you do have a PM that like leaves the job midway through, somebody else can come in and very quickly get up to date with everything that's happened on this job. So from a succession planning standpoint, it's a really nice feature to have. So for any of you thinking about, all right, we're going to see some turnover because we know that the industry is aging, I would encourage you to think about systems that allow you to keep things in one place. So when a new employee comes in, you can quickly get them up to speed. So here, again, I'm not going to show all of this stuff, but I do want to show that, there are solutions out there outside of your ERP that's doing a lot of what you need it to do that I've heard people asking for the ERPs to do. So if this is something that you've been looking for, I would highly recommend looking at technologies that layer on top of the ERP as opposed to switching up and looking for an entirely new ERP. So let's go back over to our PowerPoint. And let's actually talk about that and what we're looking at from a what is your ERP meant to do perspective. Don't want to do that. So the ERP, as we kind of touched on earlier, it's really meant for your general ledger and your core accounting functionality. Your job cost accounting, by job phase cost code, your accounts payable, vendor management, your accounts receivable, your billings, your collections, payroll processing, maybe for some of them. I know that there's a lot that say they do payroll processing, but the industry is not quite thrilled with how that's going. Compliance, security, and then making sure that you have your standard financial statements and historical reporting. So this is the core at its heart of what ERPs were built to do. So as we were planning for this webinar, Kathryn had a really interesting insight in regards to like if your ERP is meeting the core functionality of what it's meant to do, but you're still not satisfied with it, there might be some other things that you need to be looking at or conversations that you need to have. Um, so Kathryn, do you want to point any of these out or talk about any of them that jump out to you?
Let's see. I mean, yeah, if to start, if any of these are not being met by your ERP, then yes, it might be time to evaluate a new one. Um, but reliance on spreadsheets outside the ERP. So we relied a lot on outside spreadsheets for the WIP and a lot of other stuff to just to keep track of reconciliations and stuff. But since we've gotten some of these other tools on top, it's really decreased this amount of spreadsheets that we need. Um, the training and onboarding for finance and operations users. It's yeah, our training it's pretty easy. Um, thankfully, like it's very transactional, so you go step by step by step, and so it's pretty straightforward to train on the ERPs. Um, yeah.
And I mean, there's other things too, like the data accuracy and consistency. I mean, your data it doesn't matter if you have the best ERP in the world if you are not maintaining data hygiene. So is somebody owning the data? What we do, one of the things that I love that ProNovos does is we want to make sure that we're a good fit for whomever's using us. So after you do the demo and you realize like, yes, this is a good fit for us, we actually we'll sign an NDA and we'll sync your data complimentary because we want you to see what your data looks like in our solution because there's so many construction technology companies out there that they sell you a bill of goods, right? It's like you think you're getting the world and then you get into it and you're so frustrated because you're like, on the demo, they told me it was going to do this and they showed me. So we prefer that you actually get to see it with your own data. And what we have noticed oftentimes is we bring in the data and people start saying like, why is this job appearing? Why is this in here? And then they realize they have a hygiene issue within their ERP. And
Mm.
then they're like, okay, we need to get this cleaned up, and this is going to solve a lot of our issues. And so that's another thing that, like, when you are talking to vendors, if the vendor does not allow you to sync your data or doesn't give you a sandbox and and they're expecting you to make a decision purely by them driving and showing you through their lens, that right there is a red flag for me. And a lot of construction technology companies do this, but pushback. We initially did not give sandboxes, but we had enough people in the industry who just did not trust technology as a whole that we realized it was in our best interest to let people play around with it to make sure they knew what they were signing up for versus them signing up and then being disenfranchised with us and then, churning a year later. So that's just a tip that I give a lot of people is ask for them to sync it with your data or ask to get a sandbox environment to make sure that what they're telling you you're getting and what you're actually getting are going to be the same thing. So these are some of the areas too that just kind of when you get the PowerPoint, like look at this stuff and really ask yourself, like if our ERP is doing what it was built to do, then do we need to address some of this other stuff? And a lot of the stuff on this slide, it has to do with human relationships, which you can't just throw money out there and fix it. It's going to require time. And I know that most of you on this call, you have been tasked with so much. Not only are you doing accounting, you're doing the technology, you're doing the HR, like you have so much going on. So maybe there's the opportunity for growing the team and having somebody who focuses in on some of these areas that can help move the company forward, as opposed to, constantly throwing money at technology.
Absolutely. I think it's awesome that you guys give your clients or potential clients the ability to see their data because it changes everything when you can see your actual data in a solution versus just the demo data because it's just it doesn't mean the same thing for sure. And I don't know I don't know what other software company gives you a demo for 48 hours.
Yes. Yeah, it's just again, we've talked to so many people and so we're listening to the industry. And so we are big about adapting our company based on what the industry needs. And so maybe that's just because we're still, an emerging company and we have the flexibility to do that. But I've been in the tech game since 2012, and I will say that I think more technology companies need to be transparent and clear with their clients as opposed to getting them in and having them frustrated, because then it does no good for the rest of us, Like when we rise, everybody rises with us. So I know we're coming kind of we're getting to the end of this, so I want to really get into the idea of replacing your ERP. So when your company, you guys had the conversation about possibly changing your ERP, what were the concerns that you initially had when you heard people talking about, we should switch and we should, get off Sage 300 and look for something else?
Well, for one, if you've ever done an ERP switch, it's quite the undertaking. So you have to just realize that it's going to take a good chunk of a year, probably, if not a full year, to like really get everything settled, everything, all of the settings. It's just a lot. It's a huge undertaking. So for one, you don't want to make this decision lightly. And then, of course, the price. Like we bought Sage back in 2018, did the ERP switch, and like we paid for it. We pay a maintenance fee, that's it. So like going to one of these subscription-based options, is just a lot for like a mid-sized company going from, you know, almost quadrupling our accounting software plus all the add-ons because we'll still need the HR, we'll still need the payroll, we'll still need the AP invoice processing. So it's not like those are going away when we get a new ERP. It's that plus everything else. So um, yeah, for sure.
And so you realized kind of one of the biggest issues that you all had was the reporting issue. And so what made you step back and say, let's solve the reporting problem first?
Yeah, so I just stepped back and said, okay, what is it that I really am struggling with Sage? And it was the reporting. I didn't have the reports that I needed. The reports that they had just were not exactly what I wanted. I used Report Designer and edited them as much as I could. But they still just weren't like out of the box, like giving me what I needed. Um, the ERP was doing what it was supposed to do, but I needed better visibility and reporting so I could actually use the data versus, I needed to be able to make decisions off the data, not just have it all in a report, just the transactions.
Right. So I know that outside of like the time investment in getting a new ERP, what other risks did you see in changing accounting systems versus adding something on top?
Um, Talks about it a little bit, but there's always unknowns when you're purchasing things. I keep hearing people buying these, they get promised the world and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna do that, we're gonna do that. And then they get into it and they don't do this and don't do that. And they have to spend extra to get this and they have to spend extra to do that. So like I just have a lot of reservations about getting something new and expecting it to do what what it's actually been promised to do. Because I've implemented a decent amount of technology and it most of them have have always had something that I thought it would do that it turns out it doesn't do.
So this next one is basically what you did was you decided to build a smarter tech stack without replacing the ERP. So this kind of gives you a visualization of what that would look like. So, your ERP remains your system of record, also known as your single source of truth. And then on top of that, you layered financial intelligence on that. So your accounting access stayed protected, but your insights were able to be shared broadly. And then you had an ERP that was flexible enough that you had APIs. And so then imagine in this diagram, we can bolt on your timekeeping, we can bolt on your HR, we can bolt on all those other functionalities. So now you end up with a system that was designed specifically for your company versus trying to take an end-to-end system and make it work and changing operational procedures and structures and everything like that, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the thing with the having like HH2 for AP and HR and payroll, like if we ever wanted to move off of Sage, we that's something that won't change because HH2 integrates with so many other things also. We can just stay on that, reintegrate with our new ERP, and then it's just one big chunk of processes that are not changing. Um,
That's another fantastic insight that if nobody's listening to anything else because they're multitasking, hear me out on this one. When you try to go into in technology, and this is a lesson I learned from my first technology CEO when I worked at Interlink One. And he was always so big on do not put all of your eggs in one basket with the vendor. Because then if you're not happy with the evolution of a certain functionality or feature, you are stuck with that vendor for absolutely everything. However, when you think about building a tech stack and think about open APIs, then if you don't like one of the components, it's very easy for you to change it out and plug in something new versus having to go find a whole nother end-to-end vendor that can do everything you want. And the other beauty of that is like HH2 is specialized in something, ProNovos, we specialize in financial intelligence. Sage specializes in the ERP. You want to work for companies that are passionate and focused in on one thing and not trying to do everything subpar. Find excellence and then build your own technology stack around that idea.
Absolutely.
So, when it came to thinking about who needed insights versus who needs system access, I feel like that's always an interesting topic of conversation with any technology. How did you all decide who actually needed system access versus who just needed the insights?
Yeah, so we started by separating like roles from responsibilities. So the system access was reserved for only the people that actually touched, entered, needed that access to the accounting system, and then we limited, everyone else to not using it. So um, when we first got it, it was only accounting in there and the seat, like the president. And now we have some pre-construction that interchange orders and stuff, but they're the only ones. We're not gonna keep keep adding people. Like I said, it costs more to add people to the remote desktop, and it costs more to add seats and licenses and all of that to the ERP, let alone, risks of data getting changed and stuff like that. So so we really only limited it to people that needed to actually change something in the ERP.
So I'm assuming the PMs were the ones that needed that visibility and the insights. So then what changed once your PMs could see their job performance without relying on you all to have to pull those reports for them?
Yeah, so it changed everything. I had for when I had more time in my day, I wasn't running reports constantly. They finally had the answers and the data that they needed to make those like real-time decisions, mid-month decisions to, fix an overage or figure out a labor issue, um, instead of waiting till 45 days later to 30 days later to figure out, oh, whoops, I went over on my labor, or went over on materials, or that change order didn't get entered because they were more fully in control of the whole process.
Of that. So in my experience, one of the hardest things to manage with technology is change management. You have some people who they grew up in a completely analog society. You have some people who grew up on the cusp of analog and digital, and now you have some people in your organization that have only known the digital world. So, from a change management perspective, who did you guys utilize to help drive adoption, and how did that work for you all?
So I had been talking about, hey, we're gonna, implement this new um, AI intelligence tool. So you guys will have better visibility of your jobs. And it was honestly pretty well taken because I really just made sure, it was going to answer the questions that they needed. It was going to answer like what all of the questions that I was getting, what transactions are in this cost code, what went in here, did this get posted wrong? They can see all of that now. And then they also have like the dashboards and they can see their cash and their commitments and they can see all of the things that they didn't even know they needed or wanted to see. But now they have so much more information to make really informed decisions and, you know, helping, yeah, just helping them do their job better, easier. And so they took to it pretty easily. They were, they all wanted to get in there and look around and see what it was. So the adoption part was pretty easy on the PM side.
Awesome. And I mean, for those of you that are thinking about all the work that goes into this, there is like, at the other end of this all, the when the sky parts and the sun starts shining through, there are a lot of positive changes that happen when you start building this tech stack. The PMs are going to have faster visibility into their job performance. You and your leadership team are going to have more confidence in your WIP and forecast. There's going to be fewer surprises later in the month, and then you're going to spend less time building reports and more time reviewing them and thinking critically. And that's the one piece that with our clients, we have had some that, they're Alessandro Electric. Their job reviews used to be 4 hours with every single PM, and they nicknamed them penalty box meetings because that's what it felt like they were just getting beat up in a penalty box. And after they switched to, layering financial intelligence on top of their ERP, they've gotten those down to 30 minutes, and they're very focused. They know exactly what to talk about, and they can get them in and out and back to doing what they love. Whereas, I mean, there's other insights that you're going to glean, with you all being stretched as thin as you are, that more time reviewing and thinking critically and seeing where things are at and like looking at the trends in your cash flow to make sure there aren't any surprises coming up. It's going to make the world of difference. So I just did want to share this with everybody that there is, outside of all of this chaos that it can feel like with technology, there is this bright spot once you get everything kind of perfected and figured out with the tech stack. So for you all, what was the first noticeable change that you kind of observed once you got that tech stack in place?
Yeah, so I mentioned it a little bit before, but just how much more time I had back to doing things that were important to my job, the cash flow, all the financial things, rather than spending all my time getting those PMs the reports and answering all of their questions. Once the PMs had the same data that I did, there wasn't a need for them to call me every time they needed more information on a report or asking for a new report. They just were self-sufficient. I felt kind of sad. They didn't call me anymore, but I got a lot more stuff done. They could access everything in real time. They were happier. I was happier. They weren't waiting on me to finish whatever I was doing to send them the reports. So it was personally, it was a really a great change.
And when those PMs did call you, did the conversations go from being like more reactive to proactive?
Yeah, absolutely. They would say, "Oh, I saw this on the report. Like, what is that? Why?" And we could really like fix problems in real time versus like 2 months later when they finally realized something was wrong.
And I know we're wrapping up, and so just, kind of some of the things that the takeaways from all of this is we've talked about, what an ERP is meant to do, and if it's not doing that, some of the things that you should analyze. But I think a few of the lessons from this are like if you're using a lot of spreadsheets, there's nothing wrong with that, but it could be a symptom of missing structure. Your frustration with your ERP does not mean that the ERP is failing. It just means that it's not working the way in which your operations are currently, set up to move. And then the right tech stack, it's going to take time to build, but when you do the due diligence and you build it correctly, you're going to have so much more control and clarity when it comes to these projects, and knowing where things stand and everybody being on the same page. So before we kind of jump into advice, I am going to launch a poll. You kind of got to see a little bit of ProNovos, but there's much more that we could show you. So if you do want to see it with or without your data, I'm launching a poll now. I know that it's busy season, so if now is not a good time, but you do want to see it, feel free to check out or click on the reach out to me in 60 days and we can follow up with you then. But this is one of the best ways to learn is to do demos. And I'm constantly telling people, do the demo, but set your expectations with the salesperson. A lot of times people won't do demos because they don't want to end up on a list because salespeople are relentless. So anytime you do a demo with a technology person, let them know I am window shopping. I want to see what you have to offer and then give them timelines. And just say, like, listen, this is great, but I'm not ready to make a decision. I need more time. Put a date on the calendar. So kind of control that interaction because if you don't outwardly go and set the expectation, the salespeople have quotas and they will just constantly hound you. And if you ever do sign up for a demo with us and you set those expectations and somebody is not respecting those, I think that that does tell you a lot about the partner that you're going to work with going forward in that space. So I'll leave this up for another couple of minutes or so. So I guess, Kathryn, for you, what advice would you give controllers who feel stuck in Excel but are nervous about introducing new tools?
Yeah, Excel isn't the enemy. Like we love Excel. We've used it forever. You don't have to get rid of it. Just, pick a process that could be streamlined outside of Excel and just do one thing at a time. Just yeah, pick one process, maybe the whip. We're gonna do the whip in a different way, in the um your AI solution or forecasting solution. We're going to do it out there instead of in Excel. Um, I know as an accountant, we love Excel. It's the Bible, so it's very hard to get rid of it. But as you start using other solutions that I didn't even know were out there 6 months ago, um, it really changes your perspective on. I mean, don't get rid of Excel. It's you can keep Excel, I promise. But there are things that can be streamlined without it.
And then in this journey, what would you tell people not to do?
Yeah, so don't lead with, oh, we're getting this new technology solution. I always, when we're getting something new, I'm like, hey, we're gonna get this tool that's gonna help you do your job better. Um, you know, I try to make sure that it's always solving a problem, not creating problems for the end user, the PMs or my team or whoever. So we're not, wasting time implementing something that's just going to be a headache for them. I want them to see all of the things that it's going to help them do their job better.
And then last one, if you could go back, what would you prioritize sooner?
Um, Probably project management education. So the project managers just weren't educated on the things that I needed. They weren't educated in the tools. So I wasn't getting the response. They weren't approving their invoices in time. Like they just didn't understand the relationship between accounting and their position. Where like I'm sitting here relying on all of their information to get to me in a timely manner so I can finish everything. Um, once they figured out why I needed it, the timing and stuff, they got much better at getting me all the things that I needed in a timely manner.
Awesome. Well, I know we have a few minutes left. So if anybody has any questions for Kathryn or myself, now would be the time to ask. You can either use the chat functionality or the Q&A functionality in Zoom. While we wait for some questions, I will kind of share the final thoughts about ERPs, and that is your ERP is likely doing its job, but your company is growing and you are evolving. So this is an opportunity to figure out how is your data being translated and shared, and what are the needs that you have as a company. And because, when finance and operations are aligned and they have the same insights, decision making improves, trust improves, and your margins are better protected at the end of the day. So again, it's one of those, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just yet. Really think about what the ERP is meant to do and ask yourself, is it just a matter of like needing a few things that plug into it, and then save yourself the headache of having to get an entirely new ERP?
Absolutely.
So I don't see any further questions. So Kathryn, thank you so much for joining me today. And if anybody has any questions, you can reach out to either of us. We're happy to answer them. And good luck in your technology journey.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. All right. Talk to everybody later.
Bye.